There was a time when the local record store was more than just a store you bought your records. In the 70s, the 80s, the record store was every teenager's home away from home. We didn't buy records every time, but we learned about music. We met like-minded people. We spoke the language of our era. We spoke the language of rock and roll. I grew up in the Chicago area, and the most famous record store in the area was Flipside Records. And today's guest is one of the brothers who brought that record chain to life, the co-author of a brand new book called The Flipside. His name is Larry Rosenbaum.
The following is a Tony Lasano podcast, an Opie show on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network. This is the Minutia Men Celebrity Interview with Rick and Dave.
No Dave today, but I will try to carry on without him because I'm very excited. Larry, welcome to the show. I mentioned your book came out the Christmas season, and it is quite the sensation. People love reliving those halcyon days of our youth. I think it's funny that it all started with the answer to this question. Hot dog stand, dry cleaner, or record store? Care to explain?
Fortunately, we chose record store.
Well, I mean, we're all happy too. To me, some of the most interesting stories took place in those early days. Like, when people read the book, they're just going to love this. There's the rival record store guy that tried to scare you. There was the local politician who needed to pay off. The mob guys who sniffed around. All of that is in the book. And I talked to your daughter at the book launch party, and she was like, I had no idea about any of that stuff. Do you have any favorite stories from that era?
Well, I mean, a lot of stories. You know, the mob thing was both interesting and terrifying at the same time.
Yeah.
You know, when you're approached by a couple of thugs, you know, that tell you that they're going to be partners in your concert business, and you have meetings after that indeed was terrifying.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of good stuff too at the same time.
Well, tell the story about the time that you sent Carl down, your brother, to get the door when you suspected somebody was there.
Well, this was towards the end of the extortion attempt. Our offices were above the store on Foster Avenue, and they rang us from the store that there was two gentlemen here to see us. We were upstairs in the office, and it was one of those Chicago storefronts where there's a stairway to a separate door out to the street. So Carl went down to open the door. I was at the top of the stairs with a gun behind my back because I thought, both of us thought that this was it. This was the mob guys, for their final push. And Carl went down to open the door. And, it took him 50-some years to realize that that wasn't the wisest move for him.
It's a story that he told at the book launch party, which
right,
which is great, and it's also in the book, which people should pick up. Flipside Records, the store was home to Ticketron, which also
Correct.
meant that we got our concert tickets there. And that was the era of sleeping out for tickets, for standing in line for hours. Sometimes that resulted in mayhem.
Yes.
I know you have some examples of that.
Well, the cover of the book is a picture of our first store on Foster Avenue and the crowd of people outside for the 1975 Rolling Stones tour. This was, people lined up to buy tickets.
Yeah.
And that's a perfect example of one of the beautiful parts of record stores back in those days. It wasn't the online ticket buying experience. And it's the interesting thing is people I talk to now, one of the most common things they talk about is, oh, I used to line up at your store in Hoffman Estates or in Downers Grove or wherever, sleep overnight. And it was a big party. And yes, it was mayhem at times, but it was always relatively organized confusion.
Yeah, we met I have a friend that I met waiting in line for a REO Speedwagon concert back in the day. We never knew each other, but we had this shared interest, and that was part of the joy of the record store, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. One of the neat stories, too, that came out in putting the book together is one of our managers, a girl by the name of Sandy Gar, got to the store the morning of a big ticket sale, and there was this mass of people outside of the store, and she was at the fringe and couldn't figure out how she was going to get to the door to open the store. And finally, the crowd of people just gently picked her up, and she body surfed through the crowd up to the door. Then she opened the store, but she told the people that she can't just let everybody in at once. You got to, organize a line, and the people did it themselves.
Isn't that something?
They just, everybody get in line and everything. And one of the interesting things, too, in doing this book is, to me, what became of the people that worked with us back in the 70s and 80s in particular. And using Sandy Gar as an example, she ultimately became the executive vice president of Ticketmaster and Live Entertainment.
Wow.
Which is really cool.
And she trained at the feet of you guys back in the day.
Yeah.
I still like looking through the pictures in your book. It's like a tour through my formative years. All my favorite artists came to Chicago, and many of them ended up doing record store appearances at your store, one of your stores. At the book launch party in Hoffman Estates, the guy who runs the pizza restaurant next door told me about people crashing through a window to meet Leif Garrett.
Yes, right.
And when you were on WGN-TV, you talked about the Debbie Boone appearance and how crazy that was. But, man, looking at these pictures, you had so many stars. You had Cheap Trick, Foghat, Ozzy, Ted Nugent, yes, Weird Al, Bob and Doug McKenzie. I mean, there have to be some stories.
Oh, tremendous stories. Some I can't tell, but but yeah, there's a lot of neat experiences with that. And, usually those in-store appearances were tied with concerts that were going on in Chicago.
Right.
Most of them were concerts that we produced. But yeah, it was great times, and it's what made Flipside stand out from all the other record stores.
Yeah, it's why people still remember it, I think, to be totally honest. I mean, it was just, those crazy days. And you mentioned this, but you and your brother Carl eventually got into the concert promotion business, and you produced shows at places like the Auditorium and the Aragon, and a place that is long gone now, the International Amphitheater. And I think one of the things that I loved about your book is reading the stories about what it was like at the amphitheater back in those days, and how people trying to sneak into the show. Do you remember what I'm talking about from the book?
Oh yeah. Tell
that story of how people used to get in.
Well, I mean, the amphitheater, for those that know it, was this big, long barn-type facility. There was tremendous, a lot of doors.
Yeah.
So, of course, people tried to crash through the doors. They would climb up on the roof and try to get in that way. And, of course, because of that, we had a pretty hefty security staff, which became known as the Yellow Jackets because they all wore yellow jackets.
Those were scary guys, the Yellow Jackets.
Well, it was, let's say the crowd was very energetic at times.
But wasn't there a way, like through the roof or something, that when people could, there was like a secret way to climb up a pole or something like that? Yeah,
they would climb up one of these big drain pipes onto the roof, and there was a door onto the roof. And they would get in that way. Unfortunately, they had assistance. We had discovered that part of the security detail, particularly those that were affiliated with the 9th District of the Chicago Police Department, were actually selling people in through that door.
Oh, boy. Yeah, it was the 1970s in Chicago, right?
Yes, that was the Mayor Daley era.
So, obviously the crown jewel of your concert promotion days had to be this Super Bowl of rock in 1977 at Soldier Field. There's some great pictures in the book. You can tell some great stories about it. I really enjoyed the overhead shot. It must have been from a helicopter or something.
Right.
Just incredible. Sold out, right?
Yes. Yeah, we did 4 shows that year. The first one was Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and that is the overhead shot. The second show was Pink Floyd. Third show was Ted Nugent, Leonard Skinner, and a half a dozen other groups. And the fourth one was Peter Frampton.
Man. Now, you obviously had to deal directly with some of these artists. Are there any that you found to be, how about give me your favorite and your least favorite?
Well, I think the favorite probably the guys from Rush.
Oh.
We usually went out to dinner with them afterwards. They were a great bunch of guys from Yes, particularly Rick Wakeman, was always one of our favorites. As far as the least favorite, surprisingly, Steve Martin was not a pleasure to deal with.
Oh, really?
Styx.
Okay.
Was not a pleasure to deal with. Some were problems to deal with, not because they were arrogant or jerks, to use an acceptable word.
Yeah, there you go.
But
they were having issues.
There were. Yeah, right. This was the 70s, and somebody like Johnny Winter, we could tell when he got out of the limousine whether we were going to have problems or not. If he only had a drink in one hand, everything was going to go okay. If he had drinks in both hands, we knew that there were going to be issues getting him on stage and to perform.
Wow. Wasn't Peter Frampton also an issue?
Peter Frampton at Soldier Field at the Super Bowl of Rock was quite an issue. Not only from himself, but also there were death threats against him that we had to take some unique methods to get him in and out of the hall.
Wow.
Also, too, in talking about groups that were great to work with, The Who in particular was one of our favorites.
I love that. That's one of my favorite bands, The Who.
Yeah.
And you guys were involved in that Loop show, right, where we did the live show was it at the amphitheater?
Yeah, that was at the amphitheater. That was December 8th of 79.
And then it was shown in movie theaters around Chicago, like as a simulcast, which was quite the technological achievement for 1979, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. This was the first time that it had been done for a music event. It had been done for prize fights, wrestling, things like that. But, we, with the help of Jeff Schwartz and the radio and the Loop, put together this thing. And it was broadcast at, I believe, 8 movie theaters throughout the Chicago area.
Yeah, amazing. And, you mentioned the Loop. The Loop was a station that was really tied to the Flip Side. I mean, you guys had the shirts there, right? Those Loop
yes, we did.
T-shirts that everybody in Chicago had. It seemed at one point like every single person under the age of 25 was wearing a Loop T-shirt.
Yes, it was a beautiful thing.
It was. And, you mentioned Rush. When I was working at the Loop, I got backstage and met the guys at Rush, and I remember thinking, all right, going backstage, it's a big rock and roll show. These guys do, pretty heavy music, and they were like drinking tea and reading the newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
They were just like totally normal guys, weren't they?
Oh yeah, you went from one extreme to the other with groups at that time.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of them were artists and business people at the same time, and then the other extreme, a lot of them were just flat out crazy.
That's a nice way of putting it. Now, I've been to a few events now with you and your brother, and I like. Yeah, you have a very typical brother-on-brother relationship. You give each other a lot of shit, but it's obvious that there's a bond there between the two of you. Now, Carl's the older brother, right?
Correct.
So, and you're still close today.
Yes, we are. Actually, we're probably closer now than we were even during the Flip Side years.
And that doesn't happen often once, family gets involved in business. A lot of times it goes sideways.
Yes. And yeah, we had our moments, but, it worked. I mean, we're two totally different people, personality wise and everything else. And maybe that's why it worked.
Yeah. Well, that's true. You guys are very different personality-wise.
I mean, my wife, I think it was, in the book, said that the difference in personalities, that probably I would have been happy just having the store on Foster Avenue and going along with that. But because of the push from Carl, to always look for new things and get out there. And, he was the front man. I was the pencil. Yeah. And it really worked.
Yeah. And you also were the muscle, right? Behind the scenes.
Well,
I mean, there's stories in the book about you getting training, learning how to work security and that sort of stuff. And you took that part seriously.
Yes, I did, and I enjoyed every minute of it.
If you grew up in Chicago in the 70s and 80s, you're not going to find a better book than The Flip Side. It's the story of our youth. It's the story of Carl and Larry Rosenbaum, who will forever be an important part of our youth. Thanks so much for doing this book with Ken Chirillo, Larry. I think Ken did a good job of bringing the story to life using an oral history style, quotes from the people who were there, like you mentioned, you and Carl, the people that worked at your store, people who shopped at Flipside. I think it's a treasure. Book is a treasure. Tell everybody where they can get it.
They can get the book at wherechicagorocked.com. And that'll take you right to the place to buy the book.
And I know you're going to be doing some appearances soon. The dates have not yet been determined, but once we get them, we'll let all of our listeners know where you'll be. Thanks very much for doing this. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Take it easy, Larry.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
There he is, Larry Rosenbaum. You know, when we signed this book up, when Dave and I signed Larry to do this book, I got to tell you, I was excited. And I was excited because I'm being totally genuine when I say that that place was more than just a record store to me. It was the kind of place that you went and it was your home away from home. And I learned all about my favorite music by talking to other people that were there, that the rock and roll industry, that it was so important to me. I went into radio. That's why I went into radio, because I love the music so much. If you're like me at all and you have that kind of history, you'll love the book. So we have people to thank. We, of course, need to thank our executive producer, Tony Lasana, with Opie Productions. We also need to thank Ed Silla with the Radio Misfits Podcast Network. Great Talk Radio isn't dead. It just moved to a better place, radiomisfits.com. And we'll be back again soon with a brand new episode of Minutia Men Celebrity Interview.
The proceeding was a presentation of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network. Find our other great shows on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and at radiomisfits.com. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
This has been a presentation of Opie Productions.
Tony, can you shut up?
All right, we have people to thank. We have to thank our executive producer, Tony Lasana, with Opie Shows. We also need to thank our... you know what? I'll come back.